Testing. Can you hear me, Darren? there.
I call the 2320th meeting of the Milwaukie City Council to order. This meeting is being conducted by video conference. The public has been invited to watch the meeting on the city's YouTube channel, Comcast Channel 30 and City Limits, or by logging into Zoom video conference as an attendee. The public may submit comments in writing by email to ocr@milwaukieoregon.gov. There will be opportunities for the public to give oral testimony during today's meeting. When it's time to take public comment, staff will monitor the email inbox, the Zoom participant window, and the Zoom chat to see if anyone would like to speak. We will take comments in the order they are received and seen. Spanish translation services are available upon request. The public is asked to request translation and other meeting accessibility services at least 48 hours before the meeting. If members of the public become disruptive, we will mute and remove them from the video conference. If that fails to stop the disruptions, we will recess the meeting and return within 5 minutes. If we are unable to continue, council will briefly meet off air to move unfinished business to the next council agenda. All right. So now please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Alrighty. The city of Milwaukie respectfully acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homelands of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Kalapuya, etc. Treaty, with the federal government in good faith. We offer our respect and gratitude to the indigenous people of this land. Tonight, I think, will mark a moment when we are hopefully passing a new comprehensive plan that is 31 years in the making. And it recognizes much more deeply the people who preceded us and begins hopefully to redress a tiny bit some of the wrongs that have occurred since then. All right. Announcements for the evening. The city is hosting a racial equity, inclusion, and justice listening sessions and invites its Black, Indigenous, and people of color community members who live, work, own businesses, or go to school within the city limits to participate. The objective of each session is to understand how police and other city policies, programs, and budget decisions have caused harm to our BIPOC community and identify suggested solutions for change. Each session will include 10 to 12 community members. Participants will be provided dinner for you and your family delivered right to your home. Sign up today for a session in English on Saturday, August 22nd from 12 to 3 p.m. or a session in Spanish on Monday, August 24th from 6 to 9 p.m. by emailing Brenna Cruz at rsvp@milwaukieoregon.gov. The Milwaukie Arts Committee invites the community to create music from their homes or walk and bike around the city to enjoy the sounds. This new concert series called Porch Fest is coming up on August 21st and August 28th and September 4th and September 11th. Each event will take place from 7 to 8 p.m. For a map of the performances, visit tinyurl.com/porchfest. If you would like to be added to the map, send an email to milwaukeeporchfest@gmail.com. Please remember that physical distancing is still in effect, so please don't form crowds, encroach on private property, or stand within 6 feet of others while stopping by to listen and enjoy the performances. The Milwaukie Arts Committee is seeking 4 new sculptures. Visit the city's homepage at www.milwaukieoregon.gov to complete an application. Volunteers are needed for the Johnson Creek Watershed Council's annual cleanup event on Saturday, August 22nd from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pre-registration is required so that organizers can keep teams small to allow for social distancing. The North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District is currently accepting applications for their advisory board. This important board helps to shape the future of green spaces and recreation in Milwaukie and other parts of North Clackamas County. Applications are due by August 31st. It's not too late to complete your 2020 census. If you have not been counted, the 2020 census will determine your congressional representation, inform hundreds of billions in federal funding every year, and provide data that will impact Milwaukie for the next decade. It is very important that everyone be counted. So if you have not been counted, please look into it and make sure that that happens. You can respond to the census by visiting www.2020census.gov, by calling 844-330-2020, or by completing and mailing back the paper questionnaire that was mailed to you. For more information about each of these events and others, please visit the city's homepage, where you will find the city calendar at www.milwaukieoregon.gov. So our first item tonight is a proclamation. It's Women's Suffrage Centennial Proclamation, and it will be presented by Milwaukie Historical Society's Nakar and Haley McCoy. Are they on? There's Haley.
Hello.
There's Linda. Okay, good. Hi. Welcome.
Scott, how do I share my screen?
So I've made you a co-host.
Okay.
And so at the bottom of your screen, there should be a green button that says share screen. And
Gotcha.
I'll give you an option of
Share. There we go. Okay. Okay. Why isn't it? There we go. Okay. All right, Linda?
Hello. Yes, I'm speaking for the museum to begin. In 2020, like all of us, this has been a challenging year, and the Milwaukie Museum is no different. Our last public event was March 4th, and as you may remember, it was a great presentation on Black history at Ledding Library. Thank you, Council President Faulkner, for being one of our guest speakers. Since that time, Milwaukie Museum has been closed to the public. We canceled our 2020 Historic Lake Road Historic Home Tour and our annual picnic. We are still unsure if we will host our annual Christmas at the museum, where over 300 people come to enjoy sitting on Santa's lap. Uncomfortable. We miss being out in the community with events like Ardenwald concerts, First Fridays, Sunday Farmers Market, and working with the wonderful city recorders staff for other opportunities. With all that said, we have not been bored. We have been diligently working on recording and digitizing our collections, improving our landscaping, revising our bylaws, making plans for future events. We are really excited about Ardenwald's adventures, a new virtual walking tour just like Lott's Loop, coming soon to our website. The walk stretches from the Public Safety Building to Safeway to Water Tower Park to Davis Graveyard and to 32nd/Johnson Creek. The walk is about 5.5 miles and talks about the parks, people, places, and planning. This has been a collaborative effort, including Council President Faulkner, the City of Milwaukie, Milwaukie Parks Foundation, Friends of Tideman Johnson, Jim the Barber, Ardenwald NDA, Llewellyn NDA, Hector Campbell NDA, PDX Design, and Chapel Theater. A special thank you to Kim Travis, David Parker, the Denhams, and the Hemers for doing the grunt work on this project. Look for it in September on our website. Remember, even though we are not open Saturdays 1 to 5 just yet, if you have a question or a special request, just email us and we'll try to find some answers. Now we're going to talk about women's suffrage. The women's suffrage movement began in the 1840s, in the earliest days of westward expansion, Manifest Destiny, and the Oregon Trail. Women had become tired of the traditional family roles. The husband is the breadwinner, the wife is a subservient child rearer and housekeeper. They began focusing on social reform by joining social groups. These groups included temperance leagues, anti-slavery movements, and moral reform organizations. They were among the earliest activists for workday regulation, child labor reform, domestic violence laws, and homelessness. Local leaders, who we will further discuss, helped pave the way to women's voting rights in Oregon and across the country. Haley, want to move to the next slide? An incredibly brief history of the suffragist movement in America. In 1848, a group of
Linda, before you
Yeah.
keep going, I'm sorry. Haley, the slide didn't move.
Yeah, I did not.
Looking at the main page. It's possible maybe you're sharing a different screen and you've left this one. Did it open a new window when you launched the presentation?
That's very possible. Okay, hold on. Let me.
Sorry, Linda. I wanted to make sure we saw that you guys prepared.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
There we go.
I don't know when I hit when I hit start slide, it pops up with a new window. It's so it's not going to be fancy and take up the whole screen. But so here we go.
Okay.
Sorry,
It looks
guys.
good. It looks good.
Thanks, Linda.
No problem. An incredibly brief history of the suffragist movement in America. In 1848, a group of abolitionist activists gathered for the Seneca Falls Convention in Seneca Falls, New York. In a group primarily made of women, they gathered to discuss the issues of women's rights. The unanimous message was simple. American women as individuals demanded their own political identities. While the next slide, Haley. While the Civil War in the 1860s temporarily slowed their movement, the passing of the 15th Amendment in 1870, which allowed African American men the right to vote, further fueled women activists' push for the legalization of women voters. Some women's suffragist groups even went so far as to side with the racist Southerners who argued that white women's votes could be used to neutralize those cast by African Americans. In 1869, the National Women's Suffrage Association was founded by Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, which fought for a constitutional amendment for all people. Abolitionist suffragists who argued that it was unfair to threaten the African American enfranchisement by uniting with a less popular women's suffrage movement, created the American Women's Suffrage Association. In 1890, the groups merged to create the National American Women's Suffrage Association, NASA. By now, their approach had changed. Instead of arguing that women were created equal to men and thus deserved the same rights, their new stance was that they deserved to vote because they were different from men. They began promoting a pure, more moral, and maternal political role based on their domesticity. The 1890s saw a slow turn for women's rights. Wyoming was the first state to grant women the right to vote in 1890. Then came Colorado in 1893, Utah and Idaho in 1896, Washington in 1910, California in 1911, finally Oregon, Kansas, and Arizona in 1912. As some westward states began allowing women the right to vote, eastern and southern states remained vehemently opposed. Carrie Chapman Catt, Nassau president, proposed a blitz campaign through the mobilization of local, state, and national suffrage groups, specifically focusing on the eastern and southern states. Other groups began to take more drastic approaches. A splinter group led by Alice Paul began focusing on more radical tactics for attention. Picketing the White House and public hunger strikes brought dramatic publicity to their cause. World War I may have temporarily slowed the women's suffrage movement, but regained traction due to women's work during the war effort, proving that women were just as deserving of citizenship as men. On August 18th, 1920, the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution was ratified. That year, on November 2nd, more than 8 million women voted in local, state, and national elections for the first time. Let's vote, ladies.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about some notable women in the Oregon suffrage movement. So here we see Abigail Scott Duniway. She is arguably the most recognizable name in the Oregon suffrage movement. She was born Abigail Jane Scott on October 22nd, 1834, to John Tucker Scott and Anne Rolifson Scott outside of Groveland, Illinois. In March of 1852, at the age of 17, she crossed the Oregon Trail. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I have a 3-year-old. It's the quietest place in my house. I'm sorry. Or was I?
Apologies necessary.
In March of 1852, at the age of 17, she crossed the Oregon Trail with her family, settling in Lafayette. In 1853, she married farmer Benjamin Charles Duniway. They first lived and farmed in Clackamas County, actually, and they lived in Milwaukie at one point, before moving back to Lafayette. Abigail went to Albany to become a school teacher before opening a millinery and notions shop. In 1871, impassioned by the strife and injustices told to her by the married patrons of her shop, she moved to Portland and created the New Northwest, a women's right and suffrage newspaper. That same year, she arranged for suffragist Susan B. Anthony to tour the Pacific Northwest, and she toured again in 1896. That tour led to the creation of the Oregon Women's Suffrage Association in 1873. In 1872, she was to be the lone speaker on behalf of the Oregon State Women's Suffrage Association to address the Oregon legislature in regards to the women's suffrage movement. In fear of what their husbands and others in their communities might say, no other women of the organization were willing to join her except Dr. Mary Sawtell. In 1872, Duniway and fellow suffragists, Mrs. Beatty, Mrs. M.A. Lambert, and Miss Maria Hendy, were arrested for attempting to vote. On November 5th, 1912, 52% of male voters of the state approved extending the right to vote to women. Oregon Governor Oswald West asked Duniway to write and sign the state's equal suffrage proclamation. Additionally, she was the first female registered voter in Multnomah County. Here we have Hattie Redmond. Harriet Hattie Redmond was born around 1862 in St. Louis, Missouri, to emancipated slaves Lavinia Blue and Reuben Crawford. The family moved to Marysville, California in 1871, then to Hood River, Oregon, before settling in Portland in 1880. She attended Portland's Colored School. Her family was active in Portland's African American community. They were members of Mount Olivet Baptist Church, the first Black Baptist church in Portland. In 1893, she married Emerson Redmond, a hotel waiter. Their marriage was an unhappy one, and they didn't have any children. Because of the color of Hattie's skin, she was afforded very few job opportunities. She worked as a hairdresser, a department store duster, and a janitor for the U.S. District Court of Oregon, from which she received a pension in 1929 after 29 years of employment. Like her parents, Hattie was a civil rights activist, fighting for the rights of African Americans and women. She was a dedicated leader of the Colored Women's Equal Suffrage Association, an organization born out of the barring of women of color from both local and national suffrage groups. She organized meetings, lectures, and educational conferences on women's suffrage at Mount Olivet. She also served on the Central Campaign Committee, which united different suffrage factions across Oregon. With white women earning the right to vote in Oregon in 1912 and nationally in 1920, Hattie and African American suffrage groups continued fighting for African American rights. Her hard work and dedication laid the groundwork for the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s that ultimately led to the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Unfortunately, Hattie passed away in 1952, 13 years before the passing of the Voting Rights Act. 60 years after her death, historians who were researching Oregon's women's suffrage movement for the Centennial celebration, discovered records documenting Hattie's hard work and dedication to the suffrage and African American equality movements. Before that, her work went virtually unknown. After its discovery, her simple grave marker in Lone Fir Pioneer Cemetery was replaced with a proper tombstone, honoring her with the inscription, Black American Suffragist. Eva Emery Dye was a prominent member of Clackamas County's women's suffrage movement. She was born in Prophetstown, Illinois in 1855. At the age of 15, she began her writing career under the pseudonym Jenny Juniper, publishing works in local and regional newspapers. Fueled by her ambition to learn and against the wishes of her father, she worked as a school teacher and saved money to attend Oberlin College. Upon her graduation in 1882, she was named Poet Laureate of her class. She married fellow Oberlin alum Charles Henry Dye. Her work lay dormant until 1890 when the Dyes moved from Illinois to Oregon City. They rose to prominence and wealth in Oregon City society with Charles's law and real estate investing careers. Eva fell in love with the historical qualities of Oregon City and Clackamas County, saying, "I began writing as soon as I reached this old and romantic historical city. I saw beautiful historical material laying around like nuggets." In 1900, she released a book entitled McLaughlin and Old Oregon, a historical biography, albeit a more fictitious historical biography on John McLaughlin. The book's success cemented Eva as a local celebrity author. After the success of her first book, she began researching the Lewis and Clark expedition After the success of her first book, she began researching the Lewis and Clark expedition. In her second book, titled The Conquest, about William Clark and his brother George Rogers Clark, she focused greatly on Sacagawea, the Lemhi Shoshone woman who at 16, and already a mother, helped Meriwether Lewis and William Clark on the expedition to the Pacific Northwest. Dye noted in her book that Sacagawea had been given the vote in the building of Fort Clatsop, and whether or not the group was to spend the winter on the Pacific coast. Because of Dye's book, Sacagawea was described as being the Madonna on a fur race and was seen as a symbol of the women's suffrage movement, which Dye was in support of. In 1905, she was pivotal in the decision to erect the Sacagawea and John Baptiste statue in Washington Park in Portland, saying, "This is the first time in history that a statue has been erected in memory of a woman who accomplished patriotic deeds. This recognition of the assistance rendered by a woman in the discovery of this great section of the country is but the beginning of what is due." Okay. So, on May 22nd, 1902, women of Clackamas County sent an impassioned letter to their male counterparts, urging for their support in achieving women's voting rights. It said, "Dear husbands, brothers, and sons, we, your wives, mothers, sisters, and daughters, after having crossed the plains with you, built a new land of freedom, after braving the perils of starvation, Indian wars, and frontier hardships, after tending to your hearth fires for 2 generations and giving the best of our lives for the conquest of wilderness, today ask for your ballot. We have owned lands alone with you from the beginning, have attended the same schools, and in no respect differ from you in intelligence in the interest of our country." Many notable Clackamas County and Milwaukie women signed their names, hoping their influence in local society would help sway popular opinion. Some of these women include Sophronia Llewellyn, the wife of Seth Llewellyn, a pioneer horticulturist, businessman, and politician who was key in Oregon's initiative and referendum system. Mary Beth, and I know I'm not gonna pronounce this right. Uren, wife of William Uren, who wrote measures to direct control of state governments to voters. Eva Emery Dye, who we just discussed. Hannah A. Anderson, she was the wife of H.S. Anderson, judge responsible for the first roads in Clackamas County. And Jenny Harding, the wife of George Harding, she was the granddaughter of Sam Barlow. Oh. The pioneers of the Oregon suffrage movement were among themselves the first Oregon pioneers. They came west in search of new lives, lands, and adventures. These women, whether living in Milwaukie or Clackamas County, Greater Oregon, or nationally, worked tirelessly for women's equality and voting rights. They were more than just wives, daughters, and sisters. They were Americans who worked tirelessly for decades to prove that their worth was more than just domesticity. Their voices and ideas mattered. The issue for women's voting rights appeared on Oregon ballots 6 times. 1884, 1900, 1906, 1908, 1910, and finally 1912. It took 6 tries before it finally passed in 1912, more than any other state in the country. Today, we celebrate the 100-year anniversary of a woman's right to vote. Since 1920, women's rights have come a long way. We still have work to do, but we wouldn't be where we were today without the blood, sweat, and tears of our sisters and brothers of yesterday. We owe it to ourselves, our future generations, and our communities to continue to fight for equality and justice for all people of the United States of America.
Thank you, Haley.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Haley and Linda, both for your presentation.
That was great.
I want to know who Ms. Dye's monitor was, because that hat was fantastic.
Right. It may have been Abigail Dunaway. I don't know.
I don't know. As a former member of the Abigail Scott Dunaway Women's Center of Linfield College, I appreciate that you highlighted her.
Well, she was an important woman in Oregon and United States history, and so it was an honor to research her, to speak of her, and then present that information to you all.
All right, I'll read the proclamation. Whereas Oregon will celebrate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States on August 18th, 2020. And whereas the Milwaukie Oak Grove Equal Suffrage League played a significant role in achieving full voting rights for women in Oregon at the 1912 general election. And whereas American women of every race, class, and ethnic background have made historic contributions to the growth and strength of the city of Milwaukie, the state of Oregon, and our nation in countless recorded and unrecorded ways. And whereas American women have played and continue to play a critical economic, cultural, and social role in the life of Milwaukie, Oregon, and our nation by constituting a significant portion of the labor force working inside and outside of the home. And whereas American women have played a unique role throughout the history of Milwaukie, Oregon, and our nation by providing most of the volunteer labor force. And whereas American women of every race, class, and ethnic background served as early leaders in the forefront of every social change movement, including the abolitionist movement, the emancipation movement, the industrial movement, the civil rights movement, and the peace movement, all of which created a more just society for all. Now, therefore, I, Mark Gamba, the mayor of the city of Milwaukie, a municipal corporation of the county of Clackamas in the state of Oregon, do hereby proclaim August 18, 2020 as Women's Suffrage Centennial Day in Milwaukie and encourage all community members to observe this important anniversary.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. All right. Community comments. I know we have people that want to speak to the skateboard code. Scott, do you know if there's anybody else waiting to speak?
Mr. Mayor, I concur. I know of 2 speaker cards we received for the skateboard discussion. I see no hands raised, I see no chat, and I see no email indicating anybody wants to speak on any other topic now.
Okay. Well, in that case, I won't read this whole thing. Ms. Ober, is there any follow-up from the last meeting?
There's no follow-up from the last meeting. I do actually just have a quick update that I wanted to talk about, which is the boat ramp. So at our last meeting, council actually had a discussion about parking at the boat ramp. And we spoke to several staff people and the judge just to get a sense for what she thought the best solution might be for the time being. She's recommending that we put up signage. We give this 1 year. So are the staff, that we see if we can help people be more compliant with just a few more very visual signs that make it really clear what the rules are. So unless I hear differently from any of you by the end of this meeting, and we can talk about this at the end, I'm going to proceed down the path of just posting additional signs and making that clear. Perfect. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. All right. In that case, we will move on to the consent agenda, which this evening includes the minutes of the June 16th, 2020 regular session, the June 30th, 2020 special session, the June 14th, 2020 special session, and the June 14th, 2020 study session. A resolution committing to creating an entirely equitable city and expressing solidarity with our Black, Indigenous, and people of color neighbors, and a resolution appointing Debbie Espinor, Heather Gates, and Shane Abma to the Kellogg Good Neighbor Committee. Does any member of council wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Okay, I am actually going to remove B, the resolution to creating an entirely equitable city, so that we can talk about it and so that I can read the resolution. Any other changes? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item B.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda minus item B.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve tonight's consent agenda, removing item B. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None heard. Consent agenda passes. So item B, I think this is an important piece, and I think it needed to be more called out than just sort of slip through on the consent agenda. I'm trying to pull it up here. So we are looking at updating our council goals, which is unusual for this time of year, but given all that's going on, we felt like it was important. I'm going to read the resolution, which will give many some good idea of why we are doing this. Does anybody else want to talk about this one at all before I read the resolution? Okay, I will just read the resolution. Resolution of the City Council of the City of Milwaukie, Oregon, committing to creating an entirely equitable city and expressing solidarity with our Black, Indigenous, and people of color neighbors. Whereas Black, Indigenous, and people of color have suffered horrific inequities and crimes against humanity in this country for centuries, including slavery, slaughter, rape, theft of land and property, medical experimentation, forced relocation, denial of basic human rights, and restriction from generational wealth building. And whereas the violent death of George Floyd, an unarmed and handcuffed Black man at the hands of the city of Minneapolis, Minnesota police officer, has sparked an international demand for an end to the systematic racism that has stained this country for its entire history. And whereas the Milwaukie 2040 vision calls for a flourishing city that is entirely equitable, delightfully livable, and completely sustainable for all residents. And whereas we have undertaken work to achieve that vision through our efforts in writing a new comprehensive plan that will begin to reverse code provisions and zoning that have disenfranchised our BIPOC neighbors for almost a century. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Milwaukie, Oregon, further commits to the pursuit of an entirely equitable Milwaukie by making equity, inclusion, and justice one of its 3 council goals, and be it further resolved that through this goal, the City Council commits to the following actions: conduct listening sessions and create subsequent changes to city practices, policies, and codes. Work on relationship building with Milwaukee's BIPOC residents and defining the next steps forward for this work. Request a budget adjustment to be presented to move additional resources to this work. fund equity, inclusion, and justice training for all staff, including the police department, and for related training to achieve this goal, and further our own education about systematic racism. Be it further resolved that the equity, inclusion, and justice goal replaces the council's community engagement goal. This is introduced and adopted by the City Council on August 18th, 2020, and this resolution is effective immediately. This one, unusual to most of our resolutions, will be signed by all of the council individually. So, any further discussion on this?
Glad we're here.
Then I would entertain a motion to...
I move to adopt the resolution the mayor just read.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to adopt the resolution of the City Council of the City of Milwaukie, Oregon, committing to creating an entirely equitable city and expressing solidarity with our Black, Indigenous, and people of color neighbors. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. Thank you. And so now the City Council has a new goal, along with our climate goal and our housing goal, that we will, as a city, be focused on for the foreseeable future. All right. Our next item is the downtown transportation modes and ordinance. This will be presented by our development project manager, Allison Wicks, and our police chief, Luke Strait. And after their presentation, I will open up the meeting to public comment. So, Chief Strait, Allison.
Great, thank you. Scott, do you want me to share my presentation?
I just made you co-host. You should be able to do that. Yep.
Great. How's that? Great. Okay. Good evening, Mayor Gamba, councilors. My name is Allison Wicks. I'm the Development Project Manager for the City of Milwaukie, and I'm here with Luke Strait.
Good evening, Mayor Gamba and members of council. I'm Luke Strait, the Chief of Police for the City of Milwaukie.
Right. We're here tonight to share an update to the Milwaukie Municipal Code as it relates to downtown transportation options, and discuss the use of skateboards, roller skates, and inline skates as alternative transportation modes. Overall, we're looking for council to take action on code changes regarding to the use of skateboards, roller skates, and inline skates. In September 2018, Council adopted the Downtown Milwaukie Parking Management Strategy. The strategy lays out near-term, mid-term, and long-term strategies to improve the efficiencies of the city's parking systems, and provide a solid foundation for decision-making and accommodating future growth in downtown Milwaukie. In total, there are 32 recommended strategies across 9 categories. And one of the near-term strategies is around integrating alternative modes in downtown. This includes walking, transit, bike, and can be expanded to consider e-scooters, skateboards, inline skaters, rollerblades, and other human-powered devices as important transportation modes. Under the current Milwaukie Municipal Code, skateboarding, roller skates, and inline skates are not allowed on streets and sidewalks in the downtown area and in other commercial and industrial areas. The code change proposed tonight updates this code language to allow skateboarding in streets, but would require people to walk their ride on sidewalks in commercial areas, including in downtown Milwaukie. And then I'll pass it over to Chief Straight to share about how Milwaukie has enforced current code and how they intend to enforce the new code going forward.
Thank you again, Allison. As you folks may know from previous discussions on this topic, our enforcement related to this ordinance in the past has been very minimal. We've issued about 2 citations in the past 10 or 11 years. The majority of our efforts revolve around education and issuing warnings and explaining the reasons behind the previous ordinance or the current ordinance and trying to generate voluntary compliance. We certainly recognize going into this that the existing ordinance was not necessarily consistent with the city's current goals and priorities, and we did take that into consideration when deciding how we were going to manage enforcement related to that ordinance in the past. Moving forward, for any police services, folks can call the non-emergency number, which is 503-786-7500, and that number is good 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and can explain what's occurring. So in cases like this, if they believe there is a violation of the ordinance, they can explain that. Or if they believe there is property damage or a safety issue, they can explain that. And we're happy to send people out and evaluate what's going on. We would probably still continue to have some emphasis on education. We want folks to understand the reason behind our ordinances, and also to generate as much voluntary compliance as possible. And we very much appreciate the partnership with the Downtown Milwaukie Business Association and the other partners in the city as we evaluate the need for an adjustment like this and why it makes sense.
Great. Here is our current code language, which states no person shall ride roller skates, skateboards, or inline skates within any commercial or industrial zones, which includes the downtown area. The use of above devices in commercial or industrial zones, except where authorized, is prohibited. And the use of above devices is allowed in residential zones, except where prohibited. The updated language states that no person shall ride roller skates, skateboards, or inline skates or other human-powered device upon a sidewalk within any commercial or industrial zones, unless the area is designated as a bike path. And then would still include use of above devices is allowed in residential zones except where prohibited. This change would widely expand the public's ability to ride, skate, and roll in the city of Milwaukie. I have a couple of maps to share, but wanted to maybe open it up for discussion or comment to see where, if anyone has any questions.
I guess I do have a question in the very last clause, except where prohibited. Is there anywhere that it's prohibited in residential zones? Do we need that clause?
My assumption is that there could be a private property, maybe a school or a church, that would want to post specifically that skateboarding is prohibited or inline skating is prohibited. But I don't know of any specific places that have that currently.
But that wouldn't be, I guess I hadn't really, I thought about it and my assumption was the same as yours. But then but now I'm also thinking, but that's not really ours to enforce. So does it, I think this question might still be valid. Does it?
Well, actually, the whole statute doesn't say, we only have jurisdiction over rights of way. I mean, we don't have jurisdiction over private property. But the statute doesn't say that we're talking about rights of way or public property, and maybe it should. And then we maybe wouldn't need that.
Except where prohibited.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that too much to, can we do that right now and still pass this? I think we can.
Does Justin have any concerns with that addition?
I don't know right now, without looking into it a little deeper, whether or not it is prohibited anywhere or what those jurisdictional overlaps would be. So I'm not able to really opine on the fly about that without checking a little deeper.
I suppose there could be a restriction in some of the parks.
Yeah, I just don't know. There's a lot of little jurisdictional areas that might have a prohibition against it that might not fall 100% under our jurisdiction. And I don't know specifically where that is. Hospital zones, there could be a lot of different areas where they might prohibit them on sidewalks. I guess this is residential zone. Well, yeah.
So to further throw a monkey wrench in, even before we hear from people giving testimony, it talks about and other human-powered devices. But as I don't know if anybody else got to see the article that Lisa shared today, but the rapidly growing section of the multimodal transportation world is a whole plethora of electric devices, which technically speaking are not human powered. You've got, the electric skateboards, you've got scooters, those one-wheeled things, all kinds of stuff that's out there now and more coming. So how do we want to include or not include those items in this?
Yeah, I appreciate that because I was going to bring that up too. So yeah, go ahead, Angela.
I was just going to say maybe instead of other, if we don't want to address that tonight because we have this in front of us, then what if we were to change?
Human-powered and electric devices?
And I would say small, maybe there would, to qualify that to small electric powered devices.
A difficulty, this is Justin Garricky chiming in again. I guess the difficulty then becomes how do you define small?
Yep.
Are the scooters, which are small, what I would consider a small electric powered device, but we prohibit them on sidewalks?
It could be a golf cart, that's small.
How does that differ for those, I certainly am not well versed in all of the different new bad things that are out there, but there's those little scooter things. We've probably all seen them with one wheel that seem to do the exact same thing and go the same speeds that the Lime style scooters do as well. So you really get into kind of a definition problem, I think, if you're going to start allowing those.
Well, if we're not allowing on the scooters are here, right?
Right.
We've allowed the scooters generally, but not on sidewalks, on the streets. So if this is drafted to be not on sidewalks, but on the streets, then that's not really different.
So counselors, can we actually hold the dialogue just because I would like to get the public comment in and make sure that we're actually all talking about the same ordinance by the end of that discussion too, because I think that could change the electric component as well, just because of the speeds that they go.
Yep. All right. So,
Thanks.
Scott, do you want to show us maps and then we can have the testimony?
The maps I had were kind of as examples for questions that may come up, so they're not necessary to show them.
Oh, okay. All right. Scott, do you want to let the folks who signed up to give testimony into the meeting?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Which I'm back on here. The order received, Corey Poole, I'm going to allow you to talk. And actually, I'm going to put you on the panel, Corey, in case you want to share your video, you can. And then Mr. Poole also asked to share some slides with council, so just a minute.
I believe he represents an organization. Is that not correct? So.
Yes.
And also in chat, Rory put a comment in chat. I don't know if you guys checked that out.
I saw that.
Have we dealt with that? I saw it pop up. I didn't read it, but do we want someone to read it into the, I mean, because I don't know that we're capturing chat as part of the record.
We are, but I'll read it. Rory Dunnerback wrote, skateboards are often banned on tennis courts because it tears up the asphalt. This might be a special case. So, and we do capture the chat. So anybody who writes anything in the chat, no, it's being captured. Mr. Poole is there. You are muted. I'll try to unmute you. And Mr. Poole, I will share my screen to share the slides you sent along.
Wonderful. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I hear you.
Oh, great.
Can everyone see the slides?
Yeah. Slide. And you've got 6 minutes as an organization.
Fantastic. I'm just trying to get so I can actually see my notes. Hi, everybody. My name is Corey Poole. I want to thank Mayor Gamba and councilors for letting me speak tonight. I really appreciate it. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a board member of the Northwest Skate Coalition. We're a small volunteer-based and staffed organization based in Portland, and our mission is to advocate for safe and legal skateboard transportation. I'm here today to talk to you about skateboard transportation because I was contacted by some Milwaukie skaters who were concerned about changes to the skateboard ordinance. I think there was a lot of confusion over what it involved and how it would impact Milwaukie. And this is actually good timing as we're in the middle of trying to reach out to all the cities in Metro to assess the current state of skateboarding in the region. While skateboarding is one of the newer modes of transportation we see in our streets, it's actually been around for quite a while. I'm trying to figure out how I can see my notes and your slides at the same time. Okay, here we go. If you could advance to the next slide. So this picture was actually taken in Portland in 1969. So skateboarding has actually been with us for quite a while. If you could advance to the next slide. Thank you. Skateboards are an accessible, affordable, and environmental transportation option. Skateboards can be used by anyone. A person can control a skateboard and stop comparably to a person riding a bicycle, and skateboards can travel at speeds comparable to people on bicycles. Skateboards come in many forms. They integrate seamlessly with public transportation and can be stored very easily and repaired very easily. Skateboards are also the lowest carbon impact vehicle other than walking. I keep looking for hard data on that, but I've been assured by people who know this stuff that it's absolutely true. I just have a hard time proving it. Skateboarding also might be the most, if you could advance to the next slide. I'm sorry, I'm so used to doing my own slides. Skateboarding might be the most invisible mode of transportation. While there are very few skateboard transportation studies that have been done, a few have been done, and the findings are very intriguing. You can see in this 2013 study of millennials, it found that 11% of respondents use the skateboard a few times a week as a mode of transportation. This high level of use occurs with little or no support or encouragement from most cities. In fact, some of the cities on this list actively ban all skateboarding, and they still see an enormous amount of skateboard transportation. And it makes me wonder how many more people in our community would skate to work, school, or play if it were safe and legal across the entire region. If you could advance to the next slide. Much like other active modes of transportation, there are many barriers that keep people from skating. As this 2012 PSU study found, some of the key obstacles are pavement quality, hills, and of course the greatest concern for all skaters I talk with is that they're afraid of traffic and getting injured in the roadway, and this forces them into the sidewalks. as with many active modes, a very large percentage of users and across the entire active mode spectrum are unwilling to share the road with unprotected bike lanes because they fear car crashes happening. If you could advance to the next slide for me. Thank you. This is just an example of when downtown streets are accessible to all users, kind of a shared road space. Local businesses can flourish when people can access businesses by walking, biking, skating, or scooting, or in their cars, or on foot. Any way they want to get there. It expands the potential customers that you can serve in a business, as well as making the streetscape more comfortable and accessible and a beautiful place for everyone. I don't know about you guys, but I find it no coincidence that many of Oregon's most popular retail corridors are also the most accessible to people on foot or by bike, human scale urban infrastructure projects. We see it around Oregon and around the country, frankly. If you could advance the next slide, please. Milwaukee is actually an ideal size to become an active transportation hub. As you can see in the slide there, a large portion of Milwaukee is less than a 10-minute skate or scoot from downtown. The entire pink area there is within 10 minutes for a pretty typical user. Improving multimode access would only improve that number of people who could easily access the downtown businesses and services. And if you want to go to my next slide. And so that's what I've got for you on my little presentation. I hope you can reach out to Milwaukee skaters to help craft an equitable and effective skateboard ordinance in the future and possibly the present. I and other skaters stand ready to listen and work with you to help make Milwaukee streets and sidewalks safe and accessible for everyone. I really appreciate you giving me the time to talk today, and I and our organization stand ready to work with you and your skaters to help craft things that will really help make things functional. So I can take any questions or concerns. I actually do have a little experience with other electric modes if anyone has any questions about that too.
Corey, so you've read the changes we're making to the ordinance from many of those modes not being allowed at all in the downtown area and the industrial areas to being allowed on streets, just like what bicycle is.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a big improvement, clearly. A lot of cities implement that in their downtown core areas, having a restriction on sidewalks because of the concern about pedestrian interactions. I think there maybe should be some room for flexibility because in many cases there are very young users, people who are unsure about their ability to be in the street, and of course that overriding fear of safety in the street. And I think what is in danger of happening is it becomes kind of a scofflaw. People wind up riding on the sidewalk anyways because they're afraid, and it becomes difficult to enforce. I appreciate the police's efforts to educate people because that's really key. I kind of also wonder about industrial zones. A lot of people might want to use skateboards to get to work in most industrial zones. I don't really see the street as being much of a problem for riding. I would also encourage many cities to, yourself included, rather than banning entire modes, to focus on behavior correction. So, rather than saying all skateboarding is illegal, say, we don't like this particular activity that's occurring in skateboarding, we're going to make that illegal. And I think that's actually easier than some people would think to craft rules to do that.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Does your organization do any education with skateboarders themselves and around conflicts and around pedestrians having right-of-way and having to yield?
We will talk to anybody. Sorry, I interrupted you. We love to work with anyone. We're a tiny organization, it's just a handful of us that do this, but we're passionate about it. And we work with Safe Routes to School. And we've worked, in various cities. And, if you don't involve the skaters, it's really hard to actually get meaningful change. In a lot of cities, when I've tried to do surveys to find out what the laws are, I find an amusing situation where the skaters will have one idea of what the law is, The police will have another idea what the law is, and the actual ordinance as written is actually something that's different than both of those. And so it's not uncommon that nobody has any idea what the actual rules are, and that's where it's great to bring everybody together to craft this stuff.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else? Any other questions?
I was wondering if you have an example, and sorry to put you on the spot, but you mentioned, crafting rules around behavior, and I wondered if you had an example from an ordinance that you thought did it right.
Probably an example would be in Salem. We helped Salem craft their skateboard ordinance. Salem was a really big gray area with, similar to Milwaukie, complete prohibition downtown. And in the process of crafting that ordinance, one of the things that the police and some council members were very concerned about, they could get behind a lot of the same ideas, having skaters in the street, obeying the same traffic laws as bicycles, giving parity with bicycles, which is, I think, a generally good idea. But they really didn't feel comfortable with skaters moving to a left-hand turn lane and standing in the middle of a 3-lane road, waiting for a green arrow. And so they included an aspect into their ordinance where skaters uniquely would have to cross the street and then wait in the bike lane to cross the intersection again. So you might have to wait through 2 light cycles to get through, but you could now do it legally if you're making a left-hand turn. So that might be an example.
And on the topic of outreach, I'll just add that we did have conversations with the Historic Milwaukie Neighborhood NDA group, and then also with the DMBA, the Downtown Milwaukie Business Association. And then I also spoke with AJ Waters, who's, I think, signed up to give testimony as well.
Great. And I heard through AJ eventually, so yeah.
Was there any outreach to the industrial area? There used to be an organization, a loose organization of some of the industrial companies. I don't know if that's even functioning.
Only informally, just talking to employees that I know in the area of, is skating a common form? Would your coworkers skate if they were allowed to? And, there was no opposition to it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott, can you let the next person in?
Yep, I will do that. And while I'm doing that, Douglas Edwards posted in the chat that the next wave, this was his comment, the next wave in transportation is last mile products, skateboards are next. So let me, AJ Waters is next.
Hi, everyone. I do not have a presentation as wonderful as Corey's. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the owner of Stronger Skate Park. I'm in the back room of the skate park right now to be able to meet with you all while the park is closing up right now. I just wanted to come on and voice my strong support for changing the law to allow more modes of transportation downtown for many of the same reasons that Corey listed. Skateboarding is popular across age groups, but especially with the younger people. It's an easy way for teens to get to work, to get to the bus. That last mile transportation is huge for a lot of kids to get to and from the MAX or the bus or wherever they're going. And the last thing we want to do is penalize them or hold them back from being able to both get places and also just enjoy themselves outdoors. I also want to make sure that we're looking at the recreational side as well as the transportation side, because a lot of people right now are taking up outdoor activities for the very first time. And I want to make sure that they're able to do that as many places as possible, because a lot of people don't have access to, they don't have their own driveway. They might not live super close to a park. So a lot of people riding down the streets is one of the few places that they have to go to enjoy themselves and get some exercise and try something new. And we've definitely seen that here in the last couple months as we struggle to keep scooters and skateboards on the shelves because everyone's looking for outside stuff to do.
Thank Thank you. I have another question for either AJ or Corey, actually, while you're still here. I know in some instances, the initial reason why there was kind of a ban across the board in the areas that it was banned was property owners that had steps or had benches or had some piece of infrastructure like that the skateboarders found attractive to do the tricks that they like to practice on, and it would damage the steps, it would damage the benches and whatever. Have you seen cities be able to create code that, so we're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, right? So we're just solving the problem that people had in the first place, which was that damage, and not disallowing the joy of and the very utilitarian use of skateboarding and all the other forms of transportation. Have you seen anything that just got very specific about that held water? Because it's hard to write code when you start getting really specific like that.
AJ, what do you want to take it, or do you want me to?
I had, I guess, two things that came to mind. I don't know of any specific code off the top of my head, but in most cities there are already codes and laws that outlaw property damage to property that's not yours and trespassing, and oftentimes those codes can be used to enforce that if there's an issue with that happening, and it definitely happens. The other measure that I've seen that's worked the best to get rid of this is not something that can happen right away, but it's having areas available for kids to go to do that. So you often, what's most useful that I've seen is having mixed use kind of areas where there's almost like a mini skate park built in. There's some really good examples of this around Washington State, where there's just a pathway, and off the side of the pathway there's a couple of benches that are there for the skateboarders. People can also sit on them and whatnot, but it's known like this is a skateboarding friendly spot. When we tell you to leave downtown, you can go to this little spot over here. So in addition to what you would typically think of as an outdoor skate park, having those little small spots that are skateboard friendly kind of sprinkled around municipalities has worked really, really well for many places. Also, many cities in Sweden have a lot of similar things going on where there's just these amazing skate spots built into the city. So those are my only two thoughts. So if Corey has anything else, I'd love to hear that too.
AJ took almost all the words right out of my mouth, right down to the Stockholm, right down to the Sweden cities example. A really key, one of the studies, I'm trying to remember which one it was, but one of the studies that was done found that skaters will actually go significantly out of their way to on their way somewhere to hit a curb or a feature that they really like. And it is so simple and inexpensive to integrate features like that into existing infrastructure, especially in industrial areas. And it doesn't have to be much. It could just be a little metal rail attached to an existing concrete curb that's there, that's out of the way, where there's a safe place that they can kind of leave the main travel way and hit it and keep going on their way. So I think, I call it gamifying your commute. And interestingly, some of the cities that have done this find that cyclists like it almost as much as skateboarders, and you'll see the cyclists deviating off of their commute route to go over a bump or to go up on a little quarter pipe just to kind of hit it on their way to work. And it creates a lot of fun and engagement, as well as being healthy and active.
Could you send some examples of that our way? Because I would love to see some, and just to have that in our mind. This immediately makes me think, well, we're putting in a greenway along Monroe, and we are really interested in incentivizing active transportation, and that will connect the east and west sides of our community. So if there's a way for us to build in some elements that would encourage, would make it fun for folks.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I was actually going to suggest a similar thing and take it another step. We have two different committees that are working on those kinds of things. One is PSAC, which works on our transportation, our paths, our SAFE program, right? The sidewalks, that does all those kinds of things. And then the other one would be PARB, which is our parks board. It would be really interesting for you guys to meet with them and to sort of just have that conversation about, could we start thinking about incorporating simple little ads into various infrastructure as we're planning it, because we have, God, 3-4 more parks that we're kind of in the middle stages of planning, that it would be, like you say, relatively simple to incorporate, a small, simple feature. So if you guys have the time and energy to meet with those two committees at some point, I think it would be a worthwhile conversation.
Yeah, on the infrastructure, design piece, and also the idea that, because in terms of tonight and what we're talking about, I don't know that I just looked up Salem's revised code, and it's a huge section, and it does include how to safely operate a skateboard, and it does have prohibitions in certain areas, but it's enormous, quite a bit larger than anything we're looking at here. I mean, I count, there's at least 60 separate pieces to their section. So, it's a deep dive, and that's definitely work that I think PSAC would be interested in doing with you. But I don't want to get in the way, just in terms of tonight, making some pretty significant improvements, because it doesn't sound like we're going to be able to resolve, a lot of the questions and concerns, unless we were to just totally, not do this tonight. So, and I don't think am necessarily interested in doing that. But that's getting into discussion. I just thought I might throw that out there since the mayor mentioned PSAC, because I think you've all got, a ton of experience and great ideas to share with them that they would be, probably really interested in.
All right. Scott, was there a third?
There was Rory Dunneback from the Downtown Milwaukie Business Association.
Okay.
Bring him to the panel now.
Great. Good evening. Thank you for having me. Parked here in the car to have this conversation with you. Good evening, Mayor Gamba. Good evening, Council. People, thank you so much for having me. I do come on behalf of the Downtown Milwaukie Business Association this evening. I'm really excited about this conversation. I think it's awesome. I see a lot of skateboarders around town already. I think it's great for people coming downtown and participating in the activities and doing business downtown. I think it's a great idea. So too do my fellow business owners. We've had quite an in-depth conversation actually before COVID hit. Many of our downtown business meetings were a pretty detailed in-depth discussion around the topic. Allison did a great job of bringing the old code and helping to educate, especially many of the new business owners who have just kind of moved into the area about what the history has been and why we've had these things, and hearing people's concerns that, some folks are really worried about, skateboarding on the sidewalks, which has been obviously considered. People getting hit as they walk out buildings is something that was oftentimes talked about as a concern. And then, we sort of thought about this idea of walking your ride downtown. I personally think one of the best examples of awareness campaigns in the city exists on the west side of the river down by the marina. I think that if you walk down there or head down there, you can see there's A-frame signs on both sides of the pathway there, where people are really great about walking their rides through there. So if you're looking for an example about how to maybe create an awareness campaign, I think that would be a great reference point for how to do so. I do know that our sidewalks downtown are fairly tight. I also know that they're fairly uneven at times, right? So this is something that is also often concerning for many people as they, look around the city. I think there's a couple of things that I just wanted to kind of throw out there. One of the challenges, just as a citizen of Milwaukie, is the changing of the rules and the perspectives of people riding the equipment. Sometimes they're you're riding on the sidewalk using pedestrian rules especially when they're crossing the streets, and then they go back and forth and they get back in the street and they use car rules, right? So it makes it very difficult for motor vehicle people to understand when they're crossing or where they're crossing. I've seen that in a number of accounts. So I don't know how to deal with that. It's just an observation that I thought I would share, something that's come up. I think the other thing that I loved what Corey and AJ shared about the idea of bringing the features. I love personally seeing the tricks and things like that. I think it creates entertainment. In fact, before the COVID hit, the First Friday organization was even thinking about hosting a skateboarding activity as part of the event to create awareness, as this decision was really centered around the First Friday. And we'd love to do that when First Friday comes back, have kind of an expedition of some sort. Would be really cool to create that sort of friendly awareness campaign of downtown and have some fun with it, because I think it would be really cool. And so do many of my fellow business owners. So those are some of those thoughts that we have that we just wanted to kind of share with the council tonight.
Thanks very much for that.
Thank you very much.
Any questions of Rory?
If there is not, there's one more chat that's been written in the chat, and I'll read it from Douglas Edwards. Public art and skateboard design elements could enhance transportation routes and could be sponsored, quotes, giving identity to the elements and funds. And that will be recorded in the record.
Cool.
Those are all the comments that I'm aware, or speakers I'm aware of.
All right. In that case, we'll kind of close the public hearing portion and go to discussion of council. So any further thoughts on this?
I would just add, I don't know if add exactly. Anyway, I think that a lot of the discussion around electric vehicles, for lack of a better term, it feels like that's not ready. And I would like to move on making it clear that we are welcoming skateboards in these areas sooner rather than later. It almost feels like there's so much in the electric world, so many questions we would need to answer, that's really its own piece of code, particularly since Council President Falconer went and looked at Salem's and they wrote a novel about all of their different stuff. So I would rather give that its due rather than try and cram the square peg into the round hole.
Okay.
I think that the language we've got looks simple and pretty straightforward.
Anybody else? Nope. Do we need to remove that last line? Or are we fine with it the way it is?
Fine. Yeah.
I mean, I think with Justin's concern, it seems like we could potentially, we might just be opening up a problem if we're not aware of it. I mean, if it has no functional use because we're not prohibiting it anywhere else then it's just extra language that's unnecessary, but it's not hurting anything, right?
True.
I think that's.
I'd also like to add, if I may, Denny pointed out to me in an email just a few minutes ago that under the comprehensive plan, should one be adopted this evening, hint, hint, the zone names might change. And so we might be revisiting this sometime in the near future to amend this to match with whatever we adopt in the comp plan implementation phase. And so we can do a little bit of digging and see kind of what the background was or the history behind that exclusion. One of the things Denny and I have been emailing back and forth about is how are our zoning maps addressed over some roads or state highways, things that aren't under our jurisdiction, where the use of skateboards or pedestrian traffic might be not allowed under some other jurisdiction's code. And so if you are allowing the entire zone to have skateboards, but there might be a little portion of that where there's some shared jurisdiction where it's not allowed. I can't, as I sit here today, I can't answer that question for you, but we can certainly dig into it.
So I would just note that I don't think the word zone in there is going to have that much bearing on whether we rezone or not, because this has its own map. It's not like defining it by reference to city maps. It's got its own map attached to it. I mean, I'm with Councilor Heisey that I think, we should pass this, and there are other questions that we'll need to address in future codes. For example, to me, it seems like the sidewalk prohibition, the walk your ride on the sidewalk makes perfect sense downtown, and but maybe not in all those, maybe not in the NMIA. I mean, that sidewalk, once you go under 224 and you're going up the NMIA, you're not having the amount of pedestrian traffic. You don't have doors on that sidewalk because all the buildings are set back. The issues that make it feel unsafe to have boarding on the sidewalks downtown don't exist in all of these areas in that map. And I think we might want to refine this at some point going forward. But I think, we don't have time to do that on the fly. And
I don't think the map is part of the ordinance. I think it's just an exhibit for the staff report. I mean, Allison.
The language says, as shown on the map attached to the ordinance codified in this section.
Okay.
But it still names commercial and industrial zones, so there will likely be a chance to revisit this for the purposes you've already stated, but also to do some housekeeping if our zone names change.
And I think there's other little pieces of housekeeping if we want to get persnickety. For example, when you come off the Kellogg path into downtown, technically speaking, you have to ride over 12 feet of sidewalk to get to the street, because you can't just go directly off because at that point it's a 3-foot drop to
drop off
to the street. So, and there's other little pieces like that I think we need to noodle about, and but I think writ large, I think this change is a solid change. And then as we start to explore some of the other human scale transportation modes and how, if any way, we want to regulate those, we can probably touch up this as well.
So Mayor, this is Ann. I also really appreciate that this is a statement to the community about what this council stands for and your value. So in part, this is also just making it very clear to people that something has changed. And I think it's clear to me, it's clear to staff, clear to the PD, and I'm hoping it'll be clear to the community. So for me, the biggest shift is just having a different discussion with our community. And long-term, we can have more of them.
I just want to say, while everybody's still here, I'm super encouraged by, how constructive this conversation is right now. I think, we might be in a different place, several years ago. And I think that I really, AJ, Rory, Corey, all, if I really would encourage you to keep the pressure on us to improve on this even more. And that, would include working with, like the mayor mentioned, working with PSAC and PARB, and continuing to work with the Downtown Business Association. Rory, thank you so much for being here tonight, and and just offering such encouraging and constructive comments, because I think that that's, a heck of a lot better than just simply, just blanket, asking for blanket prohibitions without sort of that recognition and mutual respect. So I appreciate all of you being here and doing that tonight.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, in that case, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move for the adoption of the ordinance amending Municipal Code 10.44.070.
I'll second.
In It's been moved and seconded for the adoption of the ordinance amending Municipal Code 10.44.070. Is there any further discussion? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. Excellent work, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Justin.
Mr. Mayor,
Unfortunately, we still have to finish the vote. 1 minute.
That's right. I forgot it's a poll.
Ordinance. So, Ms. Ober, would you please read by title only twice?
Yeah, I am pulling it up. Hold on 1 second. I had it up. So an ordinance of the City of Milwaukie, Oregon, amending Milwaukie Municipal Code 10.44.070. And again, an ordinance of the City of Milwaukie, Oregon, amending Milwaukie Municipal Code 10.44.070.
Mr. Stopper, would you please poll the council?
Certainly. Council President Faulkner.
Aye.
Councilor Beatty.
Aye.
Councilor Parks.
Aye.
Councilor Heisey.
Aye.
Mayor Gamba.
Aye.
Motion carried 5-0. Ordinance 2195.
Alrighty, our next item is the authorization of street vacation on Harlow Road. It's a resolution. The public hearing on the proposed street vacation is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is to take public comment on the proposed street vacation. Does any member of council wish to acknowledge or wish to announce actual or potential conflicts of interest?
No.
Nor do I. I see none. And this will be presented by our Associate Planner, Brett Kelber.
Good evening, Mayor Gamba and councilors. It's good to see you this evening. I'm Brett Kelfer, Associate Planner with the City of Milwaukie. I'm going to share my screen here and do a quick PowerPoint presentation for you. It's been about a month since we discussed this issue. You initiated the vacation of right-of-way in Harlow, in Milwaukie Bay Park, designated as Harlow Road. So just a quick recap for you and for folks watching. This is a little bit of a technicality in that within Milwaukie Bay Park, there is a section of the park area that is formally a public right-of-way with the designation Harlow Road. It's right across Highway 99E from Jefferson Street. It is, for all practical purposes, serving as the active park. It looks and acts like the park. But what we're doing, and the process you initiated a month ago, is related to advancing the city's efforts to complete the redevelopment of Milwaukie Bay Park. Some of the funds that the city has obtained for the next phase include a requirement to just ensure that the park property as it's being developed will actually serve as a park, and the technical requirement was to eliminate any public right-of-way that is within the park, and that's what we're doing with this one section. The process that we have gone through, it started, as I mentioned, about a month ago, July 21st, with the resolution. You initiated the vacation process. What we did was we then sent a public notice to property owners within this red shaded area in the diagram there on the right, mostly some properties in the downtown. And then here you are tonight, August 18th, holding kind of another public hearing. We're checking to see if there were any objections from anyone who received the notice. We have not received any communication from folks about this. I did have a couple conversations with some people the day that I posted the couple signs in the park, just clearing up that I wasn't posting notice of a holiday I was taking. It wasn't that kind of vacation. It was a vacation of right away. And we have not had any comments or responses to the public mailing on this. So our assessment is, that you are in a position to complete the right-of-way vacation, and that will, as we discussed a little bit at the last hearing, that will it will give the property, the vacated area back basically to incorporate it into the various tax lots that comprise the park in that area. So just for reference, I've kind of included this. You can see as we talked before, there are several tax lots, kind of individual tax lots that comprise the park on either side of this area. I also noted in the staff report, we recognize that there is an existing city sewer main that runs through the right of way. There's actually a sewer main that runs through the entire park. And one of the things that we're coordinating with among the staff is just, we'll make sure that we get whatever easement or other kind of agreement is in place, something probably similar to what there is for the rest of the park, to make sure that even though we are obviously making this function as a park, we do still want to make sure that we have access to the sewer line if needed. So with that, I'll ask if you have any questions about the process or this project.
Any questions, anybody?
I have a couple questions, which aren't really going to the vacation so much, but the park. As I recall, when they built the last, I guess I'd like to know, and maybe you don't know, maybe this is a question for Peter or somebody else, but is the sewer main like relatively recent? As I kind of recall, in some degree, it was upgraded when we did the last phase of the park. Is that right?
Good question. I'm going to see if I can defer to Kelly or Peter on that, if either of them are available, and no, I don't know offhand.
Okay, fair enough. The other question is, you noted all the different lot lines, the different lots. Will there be any effort to turn this all into one big lot for redevelopment, or is it okay just keeping it as all these separate lots?
Again, I'm happy to speculate a little bit, but I won't go too far with that. And I'll ask, I don't know if Ann looks like she probably has some information about that.
So that one I've got. So because the reason we're doing this is for the grant requirements to make sure that this can be used as a developable parcel in the future. That is not a requirement for any of the other development work we're planning on doing. So it's extra time. It's not something that we would probably spend any time on unless it was important to council.
Do you want me to jump in on the sewer?
And there's Kelly. I didn't know she was here. No,
I was here. I was hoping Peter would answer the sewer one, but I don't see him. I don't know the exact. I actually have a similar question, Councilor Beatty. So I actually invited Peter to my next NCPRD check-in meeting with staff on Thursday of next week, just to confirm what we do and don't know about the sewer line and how that needs to be reflected in the plans. So I don't know the exact answer, but I'm working on it.
Obviously, if it needs replacing, it would make sense to replace it before the park gets built.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, now this is actually just a random question to Councilor Beatty, but when we had the flooding down there and the FEMA blowout into the pipes, didn't we have to replace a bunch of the pipes at that time? So like 5 years ago? It was before I was here, which is why I can't remember. You don't think so, Mayor?
Not that line, not the one that runs through the length of the park. I think we had to do something.
It was the line coming down from downtown into the park. That's correct. Where it flew. But I don't think, doesn't this line go up and service Waverly somehow? And
yeah.
Kelly's answer was way better than mine. I just wasn't sure. I knew we had to replace something.
All right. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay. And we have not received any correspondence on this, Brett?
That's correct.
And is there anybody waiting, Scott, to make comment on this?
I see no hands raised. I see no chat, and double checking the email. I see no email, Mr. Mayor.
On this highly controversial subject, we have no one who wants to speak.
I move to close the public hearing on the proposed street vacation.
I'll second it.
Who seconded? Sorry.
All of us. Move this along.
It has been moved and seconded and thirded to close the public hearing on the proposed street vacation. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None heard. The public testimony portion of the public hearing on the proposed street vacation is closed. Is there council discussion?
We are vacating right of way back to ourselves. So I am ready to make a motion.
Do so.
I move to approve the resolution authorizing the city-initiated vacation of the public street right-of-way within Milwaukie Bay Park, designated as Harlow Road.
I'll second that.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the resolution authorizing the city-initiated vacation of the public right-of-way within Milwaukie Bay Park, designated as Harlow Road. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard or seen. The motion passes unanimously. Do we need to? Nope. No polling. Excellent. Well done. So is there no longer a Harlow Street anywhere in the city of Milwaukie?
I can't say for sure, but I didn't. No, there is actually Harlow. I think the Harlow Road actually exists farther to the east in the residential area, which is what makes it a little bit strange that there's this little piece that has that name in this area.
Now, it is very bizarre.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. You guys made that look very easy. Thank you.
I'm sure it was much harder for you.
Not so much. Not too bad.
Thank you, Brad.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
You too.
Okay.
All right. So that brings us to the headliner event, the comprehensive plan update, an ordinance which is continued. The continued public hearing on the updated comprehensive plan is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is to adopt the updated comprehensive plan. Does any council member wish to announce a conflict of interest? I do not, and I see none. The staff report will be given by our planning director, Danny Egner, in what I believe is his last official meeting for the city of Milwaukie.
I think you're right about that. Thank you very much. Denny Egner, Planning Director. Tonight is really the end of a long journey for the city to get to this point on the comp plan, and really the beginning of another journey for the city in terms of implementation of the comp plan. And another journey for me. I'm probably going to be on a river somewhere while you guys are having your next meeting.
You didn't have to point that out, Denny.
Yeah, I was going to say that was nice.
Well, getting to this point has been, again, quite a I don't know, struggle is the right word. Quite an eventful effort. We've had basically 12 hearings where there was testimony or deliberation at both the Planning Commission and Council level. We had 24 meetings of our amazing Comp Plan Advisory Committee, of which there's a handful of members watching tonight, I know. We had over 10 other events such as open houses, townhomes, focus groups, online surveys where we were doing outreach to folks. So there has been just lots of input over the last 2.5 years as this was put together. 2 weeks ago, the council made a number of last minute, not last minute, but final adjustments to the plan. Those have been incorporated into this current draft. And in the ordinance itself, there were findings that addressed the city code requirements, the state requirements, and the metro requirements. There was a section that repeals the old comp plan and replaces it with the new comp plan. There was a section that also lists out the ancillary documents that are being carried over. And finally, a section that identifies the CPIC the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee as the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee for the ongoing effort to do this round of implementation for this plan. The final thing that I wanted to mention was some comments that came in today from Councillor Beatty, and I circulated out to all of you a copy of some text amendment to Appendix B that we would like to insert into the Appendix B, which is the Historic Resources Inventory section. If Scott, I don't know if you have made me a co-host or not, but I'd like to share the screen for that piece if I can.
You're a co-host, Annie.
Let's just see if I can pick out the right thing here. Here we go. You know, I finally figured out how to share a screen and do all of this, and this is my last meeting. How's that work? Okay, so this is text that we'd like to insert at the beginning of Appendix B, which is the list of historic resources. And this text just gives some introductory remarks, some explanatory information, and basically explains where those scores come from. There's a list of scores on that sheet. So the idea was to just plug this in at the beginning of the section, and it just sort of explains how this came about, references when the last update was and when the inventory was put together. Each of the properties that were inventoried were sort of done over a few year period there before it was adopted in the late 80s. So I'll let folks read that, or I could read it out loud, but I don't think it's slightly different than what you saw, Councillor Beatty. Very slightly different.
I mean, I think it looks good. I just felt like without some explanation, those scores, begged all kinds of questions about who did that and when and what they meant and stuff. So I think this is helpful.
I think it was definitely helped clarify what that list was and why those numbers were there. So if that is all I had for comments tonight. If there are any questions that any of the councilors have, I'd be happy to answer them. I can stop sharing and if everybody's read everything. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I have a procedural question, which is just that this was my failing. I neglected to send a couple of, places where there was a sentence that kind of got smushed in the wrong place, or there's a disagreement between the subject and the preposition that's used to modify a particular phrase. Is that stuff we need to discuss, or is that sort of in the category of typos that I can send you that we can still fix after adoption? How perfect does this thing need to be? It's basically
I'm going to ask Justin to answer that one.
I'll just point out the municipal code authorizes the city recorder to make such corrections post-adoption of an ordinance.
Perfect. Thank you, Scott.
Yes, Scott, I was going to point to you for the exact language on that, but for stenographers' errors and typographical errors, we typically do go through things after you folks are done with them on a given night to make sure that they're taken care of appropriately and changes are made when we need to. So if your proposed edits are nothing more than that, I think you could forward them to Scott and I, and we can look at it.
The inner editor in me is breathing a sigh of relief.
I have a procedural question. This is a public hearing. Do we not need to close the public hearing before we have deliberation in the motion. It doesn't have it on the script.
Well, the council closed the public testimony part of the hearing some time ago.
Okay, so we don't have to go through that again, even though we're in a public hearing. It's not the testimony part of it. Okay.
That's correct. The mayor called the deliberation part of the hearing back to order. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I do have a comment and a question, I guess. One was, I was sorry to see the annexation map go, but I understand that that became just too complicated. And I do hope that, you know, we can have a better understanding of the history of our annexation in the months ahead, of our annexations in the months ahead. But, and my question is on the Exhibit C list of ancillary documents about the park master plans. It says these are implemented through a parks open space zone and a CSU process in the zoning ordinance. That's what we say we're going to do in the future, or that's how it's been done?
No, well, in the past, they've been adopted as ancillary documents to the comp plan, but implementing them has always also involved the CSU process. So with this change, you'd still need, in the interim, until we have the zone in place, you would still need to go through a CSU process. So the CSU is going to drive whatever happens. So you've still got a review process. Ideally, what that park zone will do is streamline park improvements. Until we get that in place, the CSU is the tool.
So we still have to do that. I mean,
I don't know. I just don't know why they've ever been adopted as part of the comp plan. I don't think they needed to be from the beginning.
Okay, so removing them as ancillary documents to the comp plan does not negate their existence in terms of dictating what happens in our parks.
No.
Okay, that's just what I wanted to verify. Okay. Okay.
But did we, sorry, I'm just recalling that we had a question about what that means for the process. So who would bring this to council if it were, if it were appealed and then denied by the planning commission? I think we had, I'm not sure that I got resolution on that question. We were talking about, if it has to go through that CSU process, and maybe I'm just missing maybe I'm just not remembering the answer, but we had a conversation about what would be the process for changing a master plan or doing something with one of these. And we talked about what that process was. And I think I still had a lingering question about what it would mean if it ultimately was denied to the planning commission. Who would be there to appeal it to council?
Today, if you take these out of the comp plan and someone wants to change something in one of the parks, it would go through the community service use process. And that, I think, is a perfectly fine way to approach this. Now, that is a planning commission decision. But if the city is spending the money on the park improvement, you guys essentially are the ones that are authorizing that expense. So you're, in one sense, we're the applicant, planning commission is the reviewer. Who can appeal it back to council? That's an interesting question if we are the applicant. I am not sure how that works. But I'm not sure how it would work with if it was part of the comp plan or not. The city can't appeal its own decision.
I'm sorry. Oh, okay. So it looks like we would have to reopen the public hearing to take new comment on this from staff to answer these questions about a process. I'm not sure that's.
I think this is a technical question about this.
There was a question posed on the chat if CPAC members could provide comment, and my belief is that you'd have to reopen the.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Maybe I should close that because I think I'm getting distracted by this.
I was responding to take CPAC comment. I think you'd have to reopen the hearing part, the testimony part of the hearing.
So I could try to explain this one more time, I guess.
Also, the applicant could sometimes be North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. So that might make it seem a little like they would be the applicant. Planning Commission would be taking up their application. Appeal could be by somebody else on that.
Yeah. But it would have to be appealed. And I mean, I guess that's still where.
To get to City Council?
But the council is going to be involved in the project funding. It's so there's no project if you pull your funding, or if you're the driver for how this project gets built. NCPRD isn't going to build a park that you don't support. So you have control over what happens in the park.
Yeah. My question is when, my question is when City Council and the parks are aligned, and it goes through a process and dies at the commission. That's my hypothetical. What happens?
NCPRD could appeal it to the council.
But we would need NCPRD to appeal it to the council.
Correct.
That's what I'm struggling with.
There's also a precedent of the city funding appeals by NDAs, right? So if it was a park that a particular NDA was excited about, it's potential that the NDA could appeal to the council.
I think this is somewhat similar to any type of public project, like the library or, when the library went forward, or any trail project or street project where there's a land use element to it. The city council is essentially the body that backs that, is the funding body that is backing that project, but you aren't always the decision maker.
Okay. I mean, if there's no change in the process by removing this as an ancillary document, I mean, maybe there's nothing to be done about this, but I guess I still had that sort of lingering question in my mind when this came up.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for staff?
Oh my goodness, could we actually be ready to pass this thing?
Somebody make a motion quick.
And what time is it?
Is the council ready?
We still have more.
Actually.
It's not the end of our agenda tonight, though. There's still more city business. We aren't ready to go home.
If I was a drinking person, I'd possibly be inviting everybody out for a beer, but I'm not, so I don't know what happens.
I bet Decibel could make a pretty good mocktail.
Maybe.
Do we have a motion?
I was going to say, are we ready to take a vote, folks? Yes. All right, then I would entertain a motion.
I move for the adoption of the ordinance amending the Milwaukie Comprehensive Plan Policy Document, file number CPA-2019-001.
I second.
Does that include the amendment that was presented tonight?
Including the amendment that was presented tonight.
I second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded.
And then seconded again.
For the adoption of the ordinance amending the Milwaukie Comprehensive Plan Policy Document, file number CPA-2019-001, as amended this evening. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously.
Oh, God.
The vote's not done.
Ms. Ober, would you please read the ordinance twice by title only?
An ordinance of the City of Milwaukie, Oregon, amending the Milwaukie Comprehensive Plan Policy Document, file number CPA-2019-001. And again, an ordinance of the City of Milwaukie, Oregon, amending the Milwaukie Comprehensive Plan Policy Document, file number CPA-2019-001.
Mr. Stauffer, would you please poll the council?
Council President Faulkner.
Aye.
Councilor Beatty.
Aye.
Councilor Parks.
Aye.
Councilor Heisey.
Aye.
Mayor Gamba.
Aye.
Motion carried 5-0. Ordinance 2196.
Well done, folks. That's this is an historic moment.
What a nice going away present for me. Thank you.
I was going to say, could we get, I mean, I don't know if we could do any better than that.
I don't think we can. That was the topper. Yeah.
Well,
And it's my birthday present.
yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Mr. Mayor, can I jump in just real quick? Because I just do want to take a moment, and for once, I might actually be a little verklempt and a little short of words, because this is pretty bittersweet. I think the adoption of this plan has been something that we've been working on for so long, and Denny has been an enormous part of that. And it's bittersweet for us and his team because this is his last meeting and his last big project. And so I'm thrilled that we were able to do it with him at the lead of this. We started this work when I got here just over 3 years ago, and I remember the beautiful chart that Denny had up in his office. And so we're now at the end of that chart.
I can erase it.
But you know, I think I just want to comment that Denny's kind of a legend in his own right in this region. Pretty much everybody knows this guy. I met Denny about, I don't know, it was like 10 years ago when I was working as a senior planner at Metro on the Southwest Corridor Plan. And I've always known Denny to be just collaborative and thoughtful, and just what I would consider kind of the epitome of a good planner, a really ethical planner. That's why he's a fellow AICP member, I think. And so in this year, in the role that I've played as community development director and getting to work with Denny, I've learned a ton, just a great deal. And especially in the last many months, I've been a lot more engaged with planning to help sort of transition to a new leader who has pretty big shoes to fill. So I just wanted to just take a moment, and I thank you for giving me the time and working through my emotion there, because it's a big deal. And I'm so happy for you, Denny. You've done tremendous work while you've been here with the city. Your contributions to the region are known, and you're deeply respected and appreciated. And I'm sorry we can't throw a huge party for you and have like every band in the world that's Portland that you've gone out to see, because I'm sure they'd show up for you as you've showed up for them many a night. So I just wanted to acknowledge you, and let you know how deeply I'll miss you. I'll miss your friendship and your guidance, and I know that I speak for the full staff when I say that too. So thank you so much. And I just will say for the record, I'm going to especially miss Movember, because you rock the mustache in a way that I can't express. It's just outpaced anyone at JCB. So thanks so much, Jenny.
Well, thank you very much. You know, I've really appreciated working with everybody. You know, you've been an amazing council, just great council, and the staff is also amazing. And as I noted, the CPAC was amazing. The Planning Commission's been amazing. This has really been a pleasure and a great way to finish out a career. Great place to finish out a career. So thank you so much.
Well, I don't think we can thank you enough for the tremendous passion that you've shown, especially for this project. So, and listening to all of our questions all the time, especially mine, which are really dumb sometimes. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you came in at I don't know if I was Planning Commission chair already. Right. You came in, or I came chair after that, but I mean, you came in at a time when we'd had a few short-termer planning directors. And so it's been great to have your, sort of all your experience and and having the continuity. Have you been here 7 years? 8 years?
Almost. It would have been 7 in December.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been great having you here. You brought lots of experience from lots of places, and I think you're always very thoughtful about getting us to take a step back and see why, if there was a reaction to something, sort of getting us to see why, people approach it the way they do, or, why you had approached it the way you did and stuff. And so I think you've always been very, a good educator. That's why I think it's so good that you did all those planning 101s, and I don't know who's going to pick up that mantle, but somebody needs to.
Staff did one. It was great. Yeah, it's online now too.
Yeah. So thank you for everything.
It's been easier with a lot of smart folks around me. That's the benefit. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the stars certainly aligned on this. This is a big deal for this little city. We've had, as you pointed out, extraordinary people at every level, from your team with David and Mary, and the good consultants that you guys chose, and the really hard work of the CPAC, who are all a bunch of extraordinary people building on the hard and extraordinary work from the Visioning Committee. This has been quite a long process and a really extraordinarily good process. I think the city will be well served for many years, and I think we set an example for the rest of the region on both process and outcome for our comprehensive plan. And I think we owe much of that to you, Denny. You have been gentle and kind and patient with all of our desires and our permutations, and I really couldn't thank you enough. I do believe that the city is now well set up to move into the future.
Didn't you tell us when we started this that you had some old plan from your early planner days that had to do with the Milwaukie?
Yeah. It was for the urban renewal plan. When we were adopting the urban renewal plan, I had as a consultant, I had worked on an earlier version of the urban renewal plan in the 90s that had actually been adopted and then repealed by the voters in a referendum. So it's
I don't even remember that.
I've been around the block.
Well, you got us through an urban renewal plan that didn't get repealed, and now you got us through the comp plan.
And hopefully this plan won't get a...
Hush.
Yeah. Denny, I would repeat everything that's already been said by my fellow councilors and the mayor. And I just want to say that, I really am grateful to all of your patience and hard work, over all these years. And I do, I really, I've been so impressed, both from before when I was on the visioning committee and through to today, and I know that it will carry forward into implementation. I see Vera said in the comments, on to implementation.
Right.
And I think that, we're on really good, solid footing and foundation because of all the many years of work. And it's not just been 3 years, it's been, more than that. If we consider that the visioning was really sort of the launch to this whole effort. And so, in addition to everything you said at the beginning of your presentation, to reflect on how much work has gone into this and how much, how many years, that not just you, but the entire community has put into this. I really think you can feel really good. And I wish there was a way that we could put all this into, into like some tangible thing that you could take with you as a retirement gift. But I hope you'll sort of,
It's a ream of paper.
I don't like that.
Because I have to stop at Goodwill on the way after I clean my office on the way home, is stop at the Goodwill and drop all the
So that'll be the gift, the unloading of the reams of paper.
The Milwaukie Historical Society first.
Yeah.
Well, please take our gratitude and the satisfaction of a job well done.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate it.
As the newest member of council who dropped into the middle of this whole process, I think, in some ways benefited the most from your patient and thorough explanations and your willingness to always go, well, let me think about that in a different way. Because when you do that, that approach and that transparency in the way you think about things is very helpful for anyone who's not a planner. You really can learn what the work is that goes into figuring out how to make major policy like this meaningful and appropriate. So I really appreciate that. And, it didn't have to be this way. None of the comp plan had to be this way. I've looked at enough comp plans from around the region, from cities our size and smaller and larger and all of that. And for a lot of them, it's really pretty dry. It's not a meaningful statement of identity or of a vision for a future. So your ability to really help shepherd this process through is going to benefit another generation, and I'm just so grateful. Plus, it was fun.
Well, thank you all. I've thoroughly enjoyed working with each and every one of you, so it's been really great. So
I did just want to say one thing because it wasn't said by anybody else yet. So we've talked a lot about the work that Denny performed, and it is pretty incredible. But I actually think that the staff that he has mentored and led and who have grown and done such exceptional work under him says more about his character and his leadership than almost anything else. So I just didn't want to pass by a moment to say that it's actually, for me, his leadership that has been exceptional with his team. And I think he should be forever proud of that leadership.
Thank you, man.
I'll second that as a colleague, Denny. It's been a pleasure to work with you, even from City Hall to JCB. And for the record, there's a chat comment I wanted to read into. Becky Hayes says, good luck in your retirement. It's been great working on the CPAC with you, Denny. And then there were 3 congratulatory notes to everybody about passing the comp plan: Matt Bibio, Becky Hayes, and Emma Sigor.
And Emma, one of our consultants.
Yeah, it's great that she tuned in. Hi, Emma. Thank you for all your hard work.
Okay. Hey.
So who's going to lead the movie group when you're gone?
Vera's probably going to have to step up. He's got to step up on a lot of stuff, though, so it's going to be great. I think they're going to still invite me, I hope.
Apparently so.
Denny provides all of the great questions at movie group, so.
We're watching the Gary the Wrath of God and The Conversation next week. Well, this week for discussions next week, yeah. So those are nice, heavy films to talk about for an hour. All right. Well, I'll let you guys go. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of your meeting.
Thank you, Denny. Thank you.
Denny.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Wow. Okay. I believe our last item for the evening is a resolution in support of a ballot measure that would increase the tobacco and e-cigarette tax. You guys all have it, and I will read it before we vote on it. I think very obviously, the physical damage that's done to people by cigarettes and the e-cigarettes they're learning. And they're finding that one of the very best ways to reduce that, to cause people to do less of it, is to make it more expensive. And I think Oregon has one of the lower, certainly on the West Coast, we have the lowest taxes on it. And one of the, unless you count all the tobacco producing states, one of the lower taxes in the country. So let me pull that up. Resolution of the City of Milwaukie, Oregon, in support of a tobacco and e-cigarette tax. Whereas Oregon has the lowest tobacco taxes on the West Coast, and whereas smoking is the #1 cause of preventable death in Oregon, leading to 11,900 deaths per year, and whereas over 30% of Oregonians on the Oregon Health Plan are commercial cigarette smokers, and statistically smokers are less likely to be enrolled in health insurance plans, and whereas there is currently no state or federal tax on vape and e-cigarette products, and whereas Oregonians are facing a youth vaping epidemic, and over half of 8th graders who used tobacco first experienced it through e-cigarettes, and whereas tobacco taxes are the leading cause of decreased smoking rates among youth and adults, and whereas the 2019 Oregon State Legislature passed House Bill 2270 after a robust public process with the intent to refer the measure to the Oregon voters, and whereas tobacco and e-cigarette tax would fill an otherwise large funding gap in Medicaid and smoking prevention and cessation programs that Oregonians have come to depend on. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Milwaukie, Oregon, that we declare that passage of the tobacco and e-cigarette tax by way of the Yes for a Healthy Future campaign is of paramount importance to the City of Milwaukie, and we strongly urge voters in Milwaukie and across Oregon to pass ballot measure 108. All right, is there any discussion? Then I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the resolution in support of a tobacco and e-cigarette tax.
A second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the resolution in support of the tobacco and e-cigarette tax. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None heard or seen. It passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
So I would just note, I thought we were going to put footnotes in it that said what our sources were. We did get the sources for that data from the Yes on 108 campaign. So if people are looking for the sources on that data, you can find, you should be able to find it on yeson108.org. So, yeah.
And Mayor, before we are done tonight, we do have a couple of topics that we wanted to just throw in on other business. So the first one is actually going to be an update from Councilor Parks on the NCPRD discussion last night.
Oh, all righty.
Yeah, thank you very much. I sent all of you, you may not have had an opportunity to look at it yet, but maybe you could kind of take a minute if you can get to your email. I sent you just a very quick synopsis of last night's NCPRD District Board meeting. Now, that's the Board of County Commissioners meeting as the Board of Directors of NCPRD. And the major, it was to be the only item, although there were other items they ended up discussing, but their major item on the agenda was to talk about the bylaws and especially the composition of the members of the bylaw of the District Advisory Board and how that was represented geographically or how it was represented throughout the entire district, which includes a very, very large portion of unincorporated Clackamas County, North Clackamas County. The map that I sent you shows the various CPO and our city districts, if you want to call them that, within the 27 square miles of NCPRD. Staff of NCPRD recommended that the board adopt a 9-member district advisory board with 2 members coming from Milwaukie, one of whom could be a city councilor, 1 member coming from community centers, which right now is the Milwaukie Center, and then the additional 6 members coming from the unincorporated area and being segmented as you see on the map. For instance, 1 in the Sunnyside CPO, 1 in the Jennings Lodge, 2 in the Oak Grove Oak Lodge, since that has a population of about 25,000 people. They were trying to segment it so that the populations of each were somewhere between 10,000 and 15,000 per representative. So Milwaukie had, having 2. There was quite a bit of discussion back and forth, and the discussion went off to other areas at different times, also focused back on when the district was first formed and what the intent was, and the subcommittees or subgroups that, existed at that time, and a large variety of things. There were several people who commented, myself included. I read a letter into the record on behalf of City Council that said that we would welcome and approve the 9-member advisory committee, with Milwaukie having a seat at the table for a city councilor, and for there being geographical representation for those that live in the unincorporated area or would represent the unincorporated area. After a considerable amount of discussion amongst the Board of County Commissioners, there was a motion finally passed, and I want to read you how it was captured. I don't want to tell you my version of what was voted or how it sounded, but this is what NCPRD staff captured, that we moved to reappoint the expired District Advisory Board DAB members only. If the east of 205 seat is vacant, we keep it, which meant keep it vacant. Charge the DAB with finishing of the bylaws no later than October 31st, 2020. Commissioner Savas retains his seat as a voting member. Let the current recruitment continue and close at the end of August, recruitment for new members. And then hold off the appointments until the bylaw work is completed. So basically what they meant by that was there's a discussion between should it be a 9-member advisory board or an 11-member advisory board. There is general acknowledgement that there would not be a voting member of the BCC as it moves forward. That Paul's position right now as a voting member is because he was a voting member when this other iteration just ended. And he is actually representing what had been a vacant position on the east side of Highway 205. So rather than right now take someone from the applications that they've been receiving, they're just putting all of the other people back in place. So the big questions are to be answered are, should it be 9 or 11 members? And what kind of geographical representation? What would be the best way? Should it be every 10,000 people you get a rep, or should it be something else? Or should it in fact be this CPO breakout, which is fairly fair and reasonable in almost any regard? If it's 9 people, then the city of Milwaukie has 2 positions on it, community centers, and then 6 unincorporated people who would be geographically represented. If it's 11, then it's the same thing, except the unincorporated has 8, and a suggestion was made that 2 of those be from at-large in the unincorporated, not at-large in the district. So those are the issues that I have to go back to the table with the same group that we were just working with as far as the DAB members. We do not have new members of the DAB, will not have. Now, Ms. Ober was on the meeting last night, on the web meeting, and she may have things to add that I skipped or didn't say correctly or whatever, so I'll ask her if she has something to that. But I want you to know that the reason I want to bring this to you tonight is we just had the meeting. They're going to set meetings for the DAB to begin to meet again so that we can flesh out those particular issues. I think it's really important that the city of Milwaukie know what's happening with that meeting as it moves along, because we are the only IGA holder within the district. We will need to approve whatever comes out of the district advisory board that forwards to the BCC district board, as a recommendation. So I want to be sure that you know what the movement is all along the road. Does that sound fair? So
I think the only thing that I would add tonight, can you all hear me? Okay. The pieces I would add tonight, Councillor Beatty and I actually had a conversation today, just because the way the DAB is lining up, it's possible that Councillor Parks will not be our representative by the time that the DAB is completed. I know that the commissioners talked about trying to do this within 2 months, but honestly, we've heard about this now for a couple of years, and I'm just nervous. So Councillor Beatty has agreed to go to those meetings for the time being until council, with the new council member, decides who's going to be in that seat to support us in the future. I really appreciate Councillor Beatty stepping into that. She's been going to several of these meetings already, so I wanted to make sure that was just sort of said here. The second piece is I really appreciate how clear actually Councillor Parks was tonight, because the meeting was not clear. So it is possible, and I say that with love and support, but actually their city manager said, I don't know actually what we're doing tonight, because it got very muddied. So there's a point where we may be off base with something that was said tonight about what decisions remain. I just want to let you know that that's simply because we're all going to have to listen to the minutes again and make sure that or to the messaging again, to make sure that we actually caught what the final votes were at the correct points. And actually tonight, even Kelly Brooks and I are not fully in agreement about what the final vote was. So we're just trying to make sure that we get you that information. It'll become more clear in the coming months as we're working with the DAB.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to point out that we've lost Lisa.
I noticed that. Know where she went.
My voice went garbled and then she left. So I'm not sure if that was a part of it, but Scott, if you can please be on the lookout and see if she's made it into the other room and bump her back in, that would be great.
Yeah, and one of the things that there are 2 things I wanted to mention. One is that there was another motion. Commissioner Savas made a motion that we only consider an 11-member DAB. It did not get a second, so it did not move. But then things got really muddy, and there were a couple other motions on the table, and I'm not 100% clear where they went. That's why I asked NCPRD staff this morning to give me whatever was actually voted on and what is our charge going to be. I will tell you also that one of the things that concerns me about coming to conclusions with the group as we move immediately into discussion is that in bringing back the people that were already there that could come back and not taking into account anything else, there are now 6 people. And it's very likely that it could be a split decision on almost anything, given some of the personalities and the other, communications and things. So I've expressed that concern to the Board of County Commissioners and to NCPRD staff, that we are dealing with only 6 people now that Paul is back making decisions. Without him, it would be 5 people, which is better than 6, I think. I mean, just because it's an even number, and that's difficult. But there are times when you're on a board and it should be an odd number and there's only an even number there. So I could be worrying about nothing. It's just me. I feel like I have to worry about something. Yeah.
No, and I think the thing to remember is this is advisory. So at the end of the day, the body can't make the decisions. But I do think it's going to complicate the
recommendations that we would make. So we may end up having to make 2 recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners, which would put them right back in the same place. Yeah.
So
my personal opinion is that the meeting last night could have been conducted in about 15 minutes, and they could have accepted staff recommendation, and it would have been extremely fair to everyone concerned, because it was 6 positions in the unincorporated, and 4 of those positions were in that urbanized McLaughlin area. So,
is the process going forward going to use the same arbitration?
I don't know, and I don't think so. Nothing was mentioned about an arbitrator, so okay. I know that it
or moderator. You know what I'm talking about here.
Yes. Yeah. No, I don't know. Don't know. Yeah. But, I'd be interested in, if you reply to me individually after you've looked at the map and, looked at, thought about how you think this might go and how it benefits Milwaukie and what we can live with, seriously. I mean, we're going to have a piece of the pie no matter what, but what's valuable for the district. So
I just wanted to throw in that I did the math of adding up their population numbers.
And they're wrong.
Pardon?
Oh, are they actually wrong? Yeah, so that was a part of the discussion last night that came from Commissioner Savas, was that it was off by something like 18,000 people. And where those 18,000 people fit into that map, it's actually really important. So we don't have an updated map right now, but I do think it's going to be an important discussion. And Councillor Beatty, Paul actually talked about your comments back and forth in the town hall meeting and about your agreement that general representation by percentage is important. And so I think that we just need to see what the actual correct numbers are and see if there's a better map. That's part of why they punted this back to the group.
So it's 18,000 higher than this map shows.
I think so. I think that map shows something like 90 something, and it was supposed to be over 100. Like 110 or something.
Yeah, that was the inference of both Paul and Grover, was that it was supposed to be higher.
And did staff acknowledge that? Do they think
staff said this map came from our GIS group at the county, which they expected it to be as correct as possible.
Well, I note it shows Milwaukie with 22,000, so that's higher than. I think that may very well be accurate, but that's higher than sort of what the numbers we've been using for comp.
Right, because we had 21,000, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I will just note, just for the record, that so 22,000 and 2 reps is 11,000 people per rep, right? The rest of these, as currently configured, add up to 72,000. So if they get 6 reps for 72,000, it's 12,000 per rep. If they get 8 reps, it's less than, it's like, what is that? My math is not bad. It's less than 9,000 per rep, right? So in terms of, our weight in the district and all of that, I mean, knowing for sure that this is a good number is going to be important, but, it seems to me 6 reps is not unreasonable. It's a pretty close approximation to what Milwaukie has.
Yeah. I personally, just my personal opinion, I'd be really comfortable with a 9-member board, and I'd be comfortable using a map very similar to this on CPO breakdown. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like there's some need to. I'm just thinking about the I don't know how successful they'll be, but the push to get Gladstone to join NCPRD, and the population is going to continue to grow and change over time. I would hope that whatever the BCC adopts, it takes into account that this is a living, breathing map that will have ongoing change, and that there's some sort of consideration of the process the next time. So it doesn't turn into this months-long conversation every single time there needs to be an update.
I agree. I mean, one of the documents that was shown last night was the original map from 30 years ago, and discussion about the subgroups within each area that existed at that time. But even on the city of Milwaukie, the map was incorrect because so much has changed over the last 30 years, and the rest of it too. I mean, a lot of the eastern side 30 years ago was totally unincorporated, and now is a city of Happy Valley. So it was a frame of reference that didn't quite fit.
Right.
So, yeah.
Is there a really quick explanation? Because I'm just not familiar. I'm wondering why the sort of lime green, the one representative for the population of 5,100 people.
One down at the bottom.
Yeah.
Because that's the Jennings Lodge CPO. And the staff did say, because that was mentioned, this was only 5,000 people, where the one just north of it was, what is it?
25,000. Yeah.
So the staff said, understand, right, we just basically use these CPO guidelines, and those could be geographically, moved just a little bit just to make it more balanced in numbers, and that. But that's why that one area shows only 5,000, because that's just what happens to be within what the actual CPO boundaries are.
Got it.
Yeah. Thanks for the good question, though, because it is the anomaly on there. Yeah. But anyhow, I just wanted to bring you up to date. So if you guys want to shoot me an email later or come sit in my back porch and we'll have a conversation, it's always a good thing too.
Basically, I concur with your thoughts, Wilda, that roughly this map, roughly that breakdown makes sense. It'll be curious to see what where those additional 18,000 people are. That could shift something, but
yeah.
Well, and Councilor Beatty, you were kicked off when we talked about the fact that you were actually going to be helping as we're going through the next couple of months with Councilor Perks. So thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure you know that we talked about that.
I thank you. I really appreciate that too. I think you've got a lot of good knowledge that you can bring, to that, so we don't lose any kind of institutional continuity there.
Yeah, I think that's important. And then also, Scott Archer and I briefly discussed that he and I and Laura and Kelly have been getting together every once in a while and just kind of checking in with each other. So I think it's about time for us to do that again in the near future. So, we'll see how that goes. Kelly and I can talk about that offline.
Very good. Well, thank you for all your hard work on this, Wilda. It's not easy,
It's toughening my skin.
And then, Mayor, the only other topic was at the beginning of the meeting, I introduced the idea of placing signs in Milwaukie Bay Park's parking lot, just to make sure that you all had a few minutes to think about it as we were talking through the rest of the night. But I am planning on putting up those signs. I know staff is really committed to that. We have them ready to go. And I think that it buys us 1 year of information. It also lets the judge see if this changes behaviors.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
Sounds great. Then, Kelly Brooks, I'll let you give the good news because I know they've been really excited about putting up the signs, so you can pass it along. Thanks, everyone. That's all I have tonight.
All right. Anybody else? Anything else?
I was going to make a motion.
I would love to hear one.
I'll move to adjourn.
Yay, I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, guys.
We are adjourned.
Work.
Good night.
Good night.